If you steer it to the left, the tie rod hits the shock. This thing is so bent. That's supposed to be straight. Well, the best part about living in Alaska is you can't get any parts, at least not in a timely manner. So finally got a long weekend, and we're riding. So we're gonna bend this sucker straight and get it figured out, order up a new part and take it all apart again once it shows up. But can't exactly ride with my shock hitting the tie rod. This thing's bent. Just gonna let that do its thing. Cool, thanks. You're gonna start, I would tilt the sled up on its side. I went ahead and pulled the shock bolt out first. Whatever hardware I take off, I just set it back in place. I got the drop link for the sway bar that actually snapped off when I hit whatever I hit, and it bent the control arm back. So I just taped the hardware on there just so I wouldn't forget it, and bought a new drop link for this. It actually mounts from this sway bar that goes through the sled onto the control arm right here. So we can show you from this side. So I went ahead and zipped this 19mm loose. I took the ski off just to get it out of the way and be able to not have it flap it around and hit me in the face, because as soon as you pull the tie rod off, the ski's gonna wanna do all kinds of wonky stuff. The shock's gonna be a little weird tension-wise, but once you get it up in the air, you can kind of pull it downward. Believe it or not, a friend of mine had a friend of a friend who had just pulled some parts off, and we're gonna go ahead and pop this on, and I will take you along for the ride. Feel free to ignore this setup. We are moving out of Alaska before springtime, so I've got this set up in here to thaw out so we can put it up for sale. We don't normally have bonfires indoors. So when I took the hardware out in order to get the control arms off, this is a 16mm bolt and a 16mm bolt with a 15mm nut. You crack those loose, there's these little metal retainers in there. I don't really know what they're for, but you can reuse those. So what I did, I noticed that this hardware was a little bit bent, so I went ahead and bought new bolts. I'm gonna show you the part numbers. These little plastic bushings go on the inside of the sleeve. They're all chewed up because the control arm was bent. It was just eating this right in this little area right there. Not good. So I went ahead and bought new ones of these. Part number wise, so these are the drop links. I bought two to have an extra one. That's the part number for that. If you need some of these, they are called ball joint link, double ball joint link. So those are from your sway bar down to your tie rod. And then these little plastic, I call them bushings, you want to call them bearings or couplings, little plastic pieces. Cousins de bras. Let's see, there's your part number right there. So there's 4 of those, 2 for each side. And then I bought new bolts as well, and I'm just gonna reuse the nuts, or I should say the nut. But anyways, let's go ahead and put this thing back together. Okay, so we have all the parts laid out. These are the old bolts that are, as you can see, a little bent from the impact. So went ahead, got these for a couple bucks. These spacers, I'm gonna go ahead and lube these up with some wheel bearing grease and then put them together. I'll show you how we do that. Here's the grease I'm using. I'm sure you can get some marine grease, that'll work better, but it is what it is. I greased up this sucker too. We'll go ahead and slide that puppy in, and we'll take this little coupling and pop one in. I need 2 hands for that though, and I'll show you what we do next. Alright, so we got the 2 bolts find the skinniest 15 millimeter you got, and it should fit up inside there. And then you're gonna want to tighten this up with a 16 millimeter. Alright, that's tight. And for this one, I just slid this in. I'm pretty sure I got lucky the first time and was able to loosen this thing up with the nut staying tight. Because I've been cranking this thing, and I'm pretty sure there's just a nut that slid back inside. So I'm gonna leave the bolt in there for now, and then at the very end I'll rip these plastics off and reach down inside, put that nut back on, and crank it tight while it's back together. But you're gonna wanna put the bolt through now. That way when you set it on the ground, you won't have to be fighting the suspension torque and all this other stuff on there and try and fit this bolt through. So don't ride it like this, but you should assemble it like this and get your nut on after. Shock's cracked at the bottom of the tower right there. Wow. Man, what did I hit? Alright, looks like we're gonna be laying a bead later. We got this thing apart. Let's look down inside. Oh my goodness, look at all that ice. Last thing I need to do is find a way down into the bottom here and get to this nut. So I think that's gonna require, yeah, I can see it down there. Taking this little plastic piece off and waiting for some more ice to melt. Holy crap.